The rain fell in heavy, relentless sheets, drumming against the cracked roof of the modest house like 1,000 whispered secrets. Inside, the air was thick with silence, broken only by the desperate trembling of a woman's voice, trembling like a fragile leaf in a storm. Her hands gripped the worn fabric of her dress, fingers trembling as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering like tiny diamonds in the dim candlelight, reflecting her quiet agony. Her heartbeat pounded loudly in her ears, each thump echoing the weight of her fears, the fear of losing everything she had fought so hard to hold on to. This was no grand battle, no thunderous clash of armies. It was the quiet, relentless unraveling of a life built on hope and humble dreams. Her voice, trembling yet pleading, sliced through the heavy rain. "Please, don't take my house!" The words hung in the air, fragile and desperate, a fragile thread threatening to snap under the weight of her despair. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like distant ghosts mourning what was lost. The woman's eyes fluttered shut for a moment, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, blending with the rain outside. Her world was a fragile bubble, about to burst, and she knew it. Every heartbeat echoed her silent prayer, a plea for mercy, for a second chance to hold on to the only home she'd ever known. Suddenly, amidst the storm's relentless fury, a figure emerged at the edge of the yard. A shadow against the rain, standing tall and still as if carved from midnight itself. The silence stretched, thick and expectant, as the visitors stepped forward, their footsteps muffled by the wet grass. With each step, the woman's breath hitched, her heart pounding louder, a fragile hope blooming amidst the despair. And yet, the figure did not speak immediately. They simply paused, their presence a quiet force of nature, a reminder of the unpredictable chaos of life. The rain continued to pour, washing away the tears, the fears, the silent prayers. In this moment of vulnerability, an unspoken story unfolded, not with grand gestures or miraculous solutions, but with the slow, steady pulse of human connection, born from the quiet courage of a humble heart and an unexpected neighbor's silent watchfulness. As the storm finally began to wane, the sky hinted at dawn's first light, casting a soft glow over the battered house. In that fragile dawn, amidst the remnants of rain and tears, a new chapter was quietly beginning, one whispered in the wind and carried on the wings of hope. And in the distance, the figure lingered, a silent witness to the fragile beauty of a woman's plea and the quiet strength that can emerge when least expected. Her hands trembled as she clutched the tattered fabric of her dress, the fabric worn thin from years of quiet sacrifice. The rain blurred her vision, but she hardly noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the muddy ground, where her dreams seemed to sink deeper with each passing moment. The weight of her grief pressed down on her chest like an iron vice, squeezing the breath from her lungs. For years she had woven her life into this small house, each brick a testament to hope, to love, to the quiet determination to survive. But now, all of it threatened to vanish in an instant, like a fragile echo swallowed by the storm. Her face was streaked with tears, not just from the rain but from the ache buried deep within her, a loneliness so profound it felt as if her soul had been hollowed out. She had loved fiercely once, but life's cruel twists had left her battered and worn, her heart scarred and guarded. The illness that crept through her body like a silent predator had sapped her strength, leaving her fragile and vulnerable. The world had turned cold, unyielding to her silent pleas, and her voice now trembled with the weight of years of quiet suffering. She was no hero, no brave soul fighting to the end. She was just a woman, tired, broken, clinging to the remnants of hope with trembling fingers. Her eyes flickered with a fragile, almost desperate light, the kind that flickers when someone is holding on to a fragile thread of hope amid a sea of despair. Every heartbeat was a reminder of her fragile existence, a fragile life built on small sacrifices and silent tears. She had nothing left to hide her vulnerability, her tears, her fears, her aching longing for stability. Her voice, when she finally managed to whisper, was soft and broken. "Please, don't take my house." The words felt like a fragile prayer, a plea whispered into the wind, a fragile hope for mercy that might never come. The storm outside raged on, but inside, her world had quieted into a fragile stillness, broken only by her trembling breath and the distant thunder. She felt the weight of her loneliness pressing down, an invisible wound that no amount of hope could fully heal. Her life was a patchwork of moments: lost love, sickness, rejection, stitched together with fragile threads of resilience she could barely see anymore. She wondered if anyone would truly see her, if her pain was just another whisper lost in the storm's fury. And just as she felt herself slipping into the depths of her despair, a shadow appeared at the edge of her vision. The silent rain seemed to pause, as if nature itself was holding its breath. In that quiet, fragile moment, she gazed at the figure, an unassuming presence, yet somehow rooted in the storm's chaos. She didn't know if she was ready for another encounter, another fragile exchange of hope or despair. But deep inside, a tiny, almost inaudible whisper stirred, a faint call for understanding, for connection amid the ruins of her battered soul. In the delicate dawn that waited beyond the storm, perhaps even the smallest flicker of compassion could bloom, like a fragile flower breaking through the rain's relentless grip. The rain had begun to soften, the relentless downpour easing into a gentle mist that hovered over the battered house. The woman's trembling voice lingered in the air, fragile and raw, when a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of her yard. He moved slowly, hesitant, as if unsure whether his presence would bring comfort or disturbance. His coat was threadbare, the fabric faded and patched, and his face was lined with the quiet weariness of years marked by mistakes, regrets, and a lifetime of trying to find footing in a world that often seemed indifferent. He paused on the damp grass, eyes fixed on the woman hunched over her plea, the trembling of her shoulders caught in the dim light. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he lingered at the periphery, a silent witness to her vulnerability. The faint scent of rain and earth clung to him, mingling with something else, an unspoken remorse, perhaps, or a simple recognition of shared human fragility. His hands, rough and calloused, hung loosely by his sides, as if unsure whether to reach out or keep his distance. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two imperfect souls caught in a fragile tableau of despair and quiet hope. He finally took a tentative step forward, feet sinking softly into the mud, not to intrude, but to acknowledge her silent suffering. His voice was low and hesitant, rough from disuse, yet tinged with a gentle honesty. "It's a hard rain today," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. His words didn't seek to fix or judge, they merely acknowledged the storm, not just outside, but within her as well. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed, cheeks streaked with tears and rain. She didn't speak, only blinked slowly, uncertain whether this stranger was a threat or a faint glimmer of recognition, another weary traveler in a world that often felt too heavy to carry alone. Her heart thudded painfully, unsure whether to brace or to surrender. He shifted his weight, glancing at the ground, then back at her. "I've seen houses like yours before," he murmured, voice thick with unspoken apologies. "And folks who hold on even when the world wants to take everything away." There was no grand promise, no sweeping words meant to mend her broken heart. Just a quiet acknowledgement of her pain, a simple reflection of her own silent resilience. He fidgeted with the worn cuff of his coat, eyes softening as he looked at her battered figure. "Sometimes, all it takes is a small act, something unnoticed, to remind us we're not alone. Maybe it's just a kind word, or a moment of silence when it feels like everything's falling apart." His gaze lingered, and in that pause she saw an imperfect, vulnerable man, no hero, no miracle worker, just another soul stumbling through life, trying to find a way to be better, even if just a little. As the mist gently cloaked them in quiet, he reached into his pocket, and, with hesitant fingers, offered her a small, weathered handkerchief. Not for her tears alone, but as a humble act of acknowledgement, a gesture that didn't erase her pain but silently said, "I see you." Her breath caught, and for a moment, their worlds touched in that fragile space between despair and hope, human and imperfect. And in that quiet exchange, beneath the softening rain, the air shifted, an unspoken promise that even in the smallest acts of kindness, there lies the potential for something fragile and true to grow. Over the following days, the slow rhythm of small gestures began to weave a fragile thread between them, like the first tentative blooms in a long winter's thaw. He was careful not to impose, but each quiet act seemed to dissolve a little of the loneliness that had wrapped around her like a shroud. One morning, when the rain again threatened to drown the fragile dawn, he appeared at her gate with an old, battered umbrella. It was not much, dented and faded, its fabric frayed at the edges, but it was enough to shield her from the worst of the storm. She hesitated for a moment, staring at it as if it were some precious relic, then gently took it, feeling the weight of unspoken kindness settle in her trembling hands. That simple gesture, shared beneath a muted sky, felt like a small crack in the armor of her solitude. Later, when she was working in her garden, her hands steady despite the ache in her bones, he came by with a loaf of bread, wrapped in a cloth that looked well-worn but clean. They exchanged quiet nods, and she accepted it without question, her fingers brushing briefly against his. It was a humble gift, yet it carried the weight of understanding, an acknowledgement that she was seen, her hunger for kindness momentarily fed. She offered him a small smile in return, fragile but genuine, as if the act itself was a fragile bridge across an unspoken chasm. On another day, as she sat on the worn wooden bench outside her house, her shoulders hunched against the chill, he approached quietly with a handmade blanket. It was rough and uneven, but warm, something stitched with care and a hint of humility. She looked at it, her eyes flickering with a mix of gratitude and hesitation, then finally wrapped herself in its embrace. For a moment, the weight of her worries seemed to lift, if only slightly, as the fabric cocooned her in warmth and quiet reassurance. Neither spoke. Their shared silence spoke volumes, an unspoken promise that she was not alone in her struggle. The most subtle of his gestures was always the small, steady presence, walking beside her when the path grew uneven, offering a hand when she seemed to stumble, or simply sitting beside her in comfortable silence, sharing the space without expectation. One evening, he arrived with a cup of tea, steam curling upward in the cold air. She hesitated, then accepted it, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, into her bones. They sat there, watching the horizon darken, the world hushed under a blanket of impending night. It was not grand or dramatic, but the quiet act of sharing a simple moment of peace made her feel less invisible, less forgotten. Through these small acts, an umbrella, a loaf of bread, a blanket, a shared cup of tea, the woman's isolation began to gently unravel. Each gesture was a fragile thread woven into the fabric of her life, slowly replacing despair with a faint but growing sense of connection. It was not a transformation wrought by miracles but by tiny, steady acts of kindness that said, "You are seen. You matter." Even in this quiet, battered life, there is still space for compassion, for human warmth. Yet, beneath these acts of kindness, the outside world loomed, silent but persistent. The external conflict was mounting, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had begun to forge. The storm of circumstance, of greed and neglect, was gathering strength, ready to test the limits of their fragile bond. But for now, beneath the shifting sky, she clung to these small, quiet moments, each one a silent promise that, no matter what storms may come, she was no longer invisible in the vastness of her own despair. The days grew heavier with an unspoken tension, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The fragile peace they had begun to forge was now shadowed by whispers carried on the wind, gossip that seeped into every corner of the small community, feeding on the woman's vulnerability and her humble plea for mercy. It started quietly, a few hushed voices behind closed doors, then spread like wildfire, fueled by curiosity and prejudice. Rumors painted her as irresponsible, as someone who had somehow brought shame upon her family, even though she had done nothing but cling to her battered home and the flickering hope of survival. The gossip was relentless, seeping into conversations at the market, slipping through cracks in the fences, echoing in the narrow streets. And no matter how she tried to ignore it, the words clawed at her, labels that threatened to drown her in shame. Her neighbors' eyes, once filled with quiet understanding, now shimmered with suspicion or distant pity. Even the few who had offered small acts of kindness hesitated, their resolve shaken by the weight of community judgment. The woman's shoulders hunched further beneath the invisible burden, her fragile sense of worth teetering on the edge. Each whisper felt like a gust of wind, pushing her closer to the abyss of despair. It was then that her partner, her quiet, steadfast neighbor, began to sense the shifting tide. He watched her grow more withdrawn, her smile fading into a ghost of itself. One evening, as they sat beneath the remnants of the day's fading light, she whispered her fears, a confession trembling on her lips, vulnerable and raw. "They're talking again," she said softly, voice trembling. "It's like I've become some kind of burden, a stain on the whole town." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for reassurance, for some anchor in the storm. He looked away for a moment, then took her hand gently but firmly, as if holding onto her might keep him grounded too. "People will talk," he murmured, voice low and uneven. "But that doesn't change what I see, your strength, your kindness. The world might be quick to judge, but I won't be swayed by their words. I've seen enough of the storms in life to know that they pass." His words were steady, but she could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, an uncertainty that echoed her own fears. The outside world was an unforgiving force, a tide that threatened to drown their fragile connection in shame and rejection. That night, the woman stared out her window, watching the shadows lengthen across the quiet town, each one a reminder of the unspoken judgments, the gossip that had now seeped into every corner of her existence. The storm outside had quieted, but inside her heart, a different tempest raged, fear of losing the only sanctuary she had left, and doubt that their small acts of kindness could withstand the weight of community condemnation. The external obstacle was as relentless as the rain, an unyielding force fueled by societal expectations, family pride, and the crushing power of gossip. It aimed to tear down her fragile hope, to replace it with despair. And yet, amid the tumult, she clung to the memory of the quiet support she had begun to find, those small, honest acts of kindness that, like fragile flowers in a storm, refused to be completely overshadowed. Still, the shadow of judgment stretched long and dark, threatening to consume everything, her dreams, her home, her fragile bond. She wondered how long their silent sanctuary could hold against a world so eager to judge, so quick to condemn. And as the night deepened, she knew one thing for certain: their bond would be tested, stretched thin by the external storm raging outside, but within her, a flicker of resilience still burned, an ember waiting to be fanned into a quiet, steadfast flame. The question was whether that tiny spark could survive the coming darkness. He had been there all along, quietly watching her from a distance, as the storm of rumors and judgment raged around her. Despite the weight of gossip pressing down like a heavy cloud, he stayed rooted in his quiet loyalty. Not with grand gestures or words of false reassurance, but with simple, human consistency, standing nearby, a steady presence that spoke of understanding and unwavering support. When she sat alone in the dim light of her humble home, he would sometimes linger just outside the window, listening to her soft, trembling voice as she whispered her fears to the shadows. He never interrupted. He simply listened, recognizing that sometimes words were not enough, and presence was the most profound support of all. On days when the wind seemed to carry whispers of shame and rejection, he would walk along the muddy path beside her, shoulders just a little more upright than before. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if he carried the weight of her worries on his own shoulders. His silence was not cold or distant, it was a quiet promise that she was not alone. She often caught glimpses of him out of the corner of her eye, standing firm amidst the swirling accusations, embodying a kind of steadfastness that was human and real. He wasn't there to fix her pain or to claim some miraculous solution. He was simply there, a constant pulse of quiet loyalty in a sea of uncertainty. When she hesitated, clutching her worn fabric of her dress as if it were a lifeline, he didn't press her to speak. Instead, he offered a gentle, reassuring glance, a silent reminder that she didn't have to face everything alone. The weight of her vulnerability was heavy, but his presence, so unassuming yet so steady, brought a fragile sense of calm. He knew that her strength was rooted not in defiance, but in the quiet resilience of surviving day by day, breath by breath. His loyalty wasn't loud or boastful. It was the steady rhythm of someone who stayed, no matter how fierce the storm. Even in moments of despair, when her face was streaked with tears and her voice barely above a whisper, he remained close. He would stand beside her in the rain, watching as she fought to hold on to her home, her hopes slipping away with each gust of wind and each cruel whisper from the community. His presence didn't drown her out with empty words but simply underscored the truth she was beginning to feel deep within. She was not alone in this fight. His quiet support was a thread woven into the fabric of her endurance, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, human loyalty can be a silent, powerful anchor. As dawn approached and the sky softened into shades of pink and gold, he would walk her to the edge of her property, pausing just long enough for her to gather herself. His eyes, steady and calm, conveyed more than words ever could, that he believed in her strength, even when she doubted herself. That he would stand by her side not to save her, but to walk alongside her as she navigated the uncertain path ahead. His unwavering presence was a gentle reminder that loyalty isn't about heroics. It's about showing up, day after day, moment after moment, regardless of the obstacles. In time, she began to see that her resilience grew not only from her own quiet determination but also from the unspoken support of someone who refused to turn away, even when the world did. His loyalty, rooted in genuine human connection, became her steadying force, a gentle, unyielding current beneath her fragile resolve. And with each passing day, that silent strength helped her feel the fragile glimmer of hope flickering brighter in her chest. She knew the storm outside might never fully cease, but within her, a new awareness blossomed, that loyalty, like the dawn after darkness, is a quiet promise that even amidst chaos, the human heart can find a way to endure and believe again. In the quiet hours after the storm, she found herself sitting on the worn wooden steps of her home, the rain having long since ceased but the sky still cloaked in a gentle gray. It was a strange feeling, like the first flicker of dawn after a long night. Slowly, she began to notice things she had overlooked before, the delicate pattern of moss growing along the porch, the faint song of birds returning to the trees, the way the air smelled of damp earth and hope. For the first time in a long while, her mind drifted away from the relentless ache of worry and toward the small, flickering ember of purpose within her. She remembered her days of working in the fields, tending to her garden, and sharing stories with neighbors. Those memories, simple, honest, filled with life, began to stir something deep inside her. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now found a rhythm again, planting seeds, repairing a broken chair, sketching vague outlines of future dreams on scraps of parchment she kept hidden. She realized her worth was not measured by the size of her house or the approval of others, but by the quiet strength she carried within. Her smile returned, tentative at first, but growing more genuine with each passing day. She began to teach her children how to tend the garden, sharing stories of resilience and hope. She found herself singing softly as she worked, melodies that wove the past with the promise of tomorrow. The community's judgment still lingered, but she refused to let it define her. Instead, she started creating small crafts from scraps, simple meals shared with neighbors, notes of encouragement for those who felt as beaten down as she once was. Her purpose blossomed like the first flowers of spring, slow, steady, and resilient. With each act of kindness, each lesson shared, she grew stronger, her self-worth no longer hinging on external validation but rooted deep in her own heart. She realized that her true power was in this renewal, her ability to nurture hope, to teach others that even in darkness, there is a seed of light waiting to sprout. Her transformation was subtle but profound, like the gentle unfolding of a bud into a blossom. She no longer saw herself solely as a victim of circumstance but as a bearer of strength and renewal. Her eyes, once clouded with despair, now shone with quiet confidence, reflecting a newfound belief in her inner resilience. She understood that her worth was not something that could be taken away or given by others. It was something she carried within her all along, waiting for the right moment to bloom. As days grew into weeks, her purpose became clear. She would no longer hide in the shadows of shame but step into the light, sharing her story, inspiring others to find their own strength, and reclaiming her voice. She learned that healing is a gradual process, like the slow, deliberate weaving of a tapestry, each thread adding to the beauty of the whole. Her journey was far from over, but she now moved forward with a quiet confidence that whispered of renewal and hope. The storm had passed, and in its wake, she found herself anew, not as a humble bride begging for mercy, but as a woman who had rediscovered her worth from within. She looked toward the horizon, where the first streaks of sunlight pierced through the clouds, and felt a gentle call to action, an invitation to continue growing, to inspire and be inspired, to nurture hope wherever she could. Her purpose was no longer just survival, but a quiet, powerful rebirth, an invitation to all who watched her journey to believe in the possibility of new beginnings, even after the darkest storms. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow over the small village square. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and the distant hum of voices grew louder, gathering in anticipation of what was to come. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a simple cloth in her trembling fingers. Her heart pounded fiercely, not just from the chill of the evening but from the weight of the moment, her moment, where she would face the community, her fears, and her own doubts head-on. The makeshift stage was modest, yet it bore witness to the significance of what was about to unfold. Her eyes drifted over familiar faces, neighbors, friends, even some who had once whispered behind her back, each watching her with a mix of curiosity and expectancy. She could feel the echo of her past struggles in their eyes, but also a flicker of something different, a shift, a silent acknowledgement of her journey. As she stepped forward, her voice wavered at first, but she took a deep breath and found her footing. The words came slowly, but with deliberate clarity. She spoke of her fears, the nights of crying beneath the rain, the trembling hands clutching her worn dress, the hope she had clung to despite everything. She told them how her pain had once felt like a weight that would crush her, how she had thought she might never find the strength to stand before them all. But then she shared her story of rediscovery, the small acts of creation, the quiet moments of resilience, the days when she found meaning in simple kindness, and the nights when she dared to dream again. She told them how she had realized her worth wasn't defined by her house or her circumstances, but by the strength she had cultivated within herself. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke of hope, of a future where she could rebuild not just her home, but her spirit. Her words wove through the crowd like a gentle river, sometimes soft, sometimes fierce, always honest. She looked into the eyes of those who had doubted her, and for the first time, she saw recognition, a shared understanding that everyone carried their own battles, their own scars. She wasn't just defending herself, she was opening a door for community acceptance, inviting them to see beyond appearances, beyond gossip, beyond the labels that had once defined her. When she finished, a moment of silence hung in the air, thick with emotion. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, growing louder and more heartfelt. Some faces shimmered with tears, others nodded in silent agreement. Her courage had cracked open a space for forgiveness, understanding, and solidarity. She had faced her fears in front of everyone, not with defiance, but with raw honesty, a testament to the power of vulnerability and truth. The community's applause was not just for her words, it was for her transformation, for the quiet strength she had summoned from within. It was a recognition that her journey was a shared one, that her pain and hope reflected their own human longing for acceptance and renewal. For a moment, she felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a fragile but undeniable sense of belonging. As the evening shadows lengthened, she looked up at the sky, streaked with the last light of day. A gentle sense of peace settled over her, mingling with the collective breath of the gathering. She realized that this was only the beginning, the moment where her story truly intertwined with theirs, weaving a new fabric of community, acceptance, and hope. And in that quiet, poetic twilight she heard the call of the wind, an invitation to continue walking forward, to keep building bridges, and to trust that even in vulnerability, there is profound strength. The stage was hers, not just to speak but to be seen, to be heard, and to inspire others to find their own courage in the face of fear. The night beckoned with stars, each one a tiny beacon of hope, reminding her that her journey was only just beginning. The night was calm now, the air filled with a quiet reflection that seemed to settle over the gathered family and neighbors. She stood slightly apart, her hands still trembling from the weight of the day's revelations, her heart open and vulnerable. The flickering lanterns cast gentle shadows, illuminating the faces of those she loved, some eager, some hesitant, all bearing the marks of their own journeys. Among them, her father, the man who had once looked at her with disappointment, who had spoken words of doubt and rejection when she needed reassurance most, stepped forward slowly, as if burdened by memories he could no longer keep buried. His eyes, tired yet filled with a quiet resolve, met hers. There was a long silence, thick with the weight of unspoken feelings, regret, remorse, a yearning to make amends. He cleared his throat softly, voice barely above a whisper but carrying the strength of years of unspoken regret. "I was wrong," he said, his voice trembling. "I saw only what I wanted to see, strength and wealth, stability in what I could hold in my hands. But I was blind to what truly matters. I didn't see your courage, I didn't see your heart. I thought I was protecting you from hardship, but I only pushed you further away." Her eyes welled with tears as she listened, the raw honesty of his words washing over her like a gentle tide. She had carried her pain quietly, believing she had to prove her worth through struggle alone, but hearing those words from him opened a door she hadn't realized was still ajar. She felt her voice catch, but she nodded slowly, allowing her tears to fall freely. "I didn't want to be a burden," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to be seen, not for what I lacked but for who I am. And I needed to find my strength before I could show it to anyone." He stepped closer, reaching out with trembling hands to gently grasp hers, as if trying to hold on to the fragile bridge that had begun to form between them. "You are more than enough," he said softly. "You've always been. I see now that my pride kept me from seeing your true worth. I was wrong, and I am sorry for every moment I turned away from you, for every word that made you doubt yourself." The others around them watched quietly, some with tears shimmering in their eyes, sensing the depth of this silent reconciliation unfolding. Her mother, standing nearby, wiped her own tears and nodded in quiet affirmation, recognizing the profound healing taking place. Slowly, her father's voice grew steadier, filled with a tenderness that had long been absent. "I promise to stand with you from now on, to support you, not just with words but with my actions. Because you are my daughter, and no mistake can define that." The moment stretched, tender and sacred, as if time itself paused to honor the truth of their bond. Her heart swelled with a complex mix of relief, forgiveness, and a renewed sense of family, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could find healing in humility and understanding. She looked into his eyes, seeing the man who, in his own way, had finally come to see her not as a failure, but as a testament to resilience, hope, and love. As her father gently released her hands, she felt a quiet warmth settle within her, a sense of redemption she had long yearned for. The night sky above, filled with stars, seemed to echo her feelings, shimmering with the promise of new beginnings. She knew that forgiveness wasn't an instantaneous act but a journey, and this moment was a sacred step toward a future where love, acceptance, and understanding could flourish once more. In that stillness, she took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the gentle pull of hope and renewal. The night was no longer just an end but a beginning, a poetic reminder that even in our deepest wounds, there can bloom the seeds of reconciliation. And as she looked toward the horizon, she whispered softly to herself and to the universe, "Let this be a call for all of us, to forgive, to heal, and to trust in the quiet strength of love. For only then can we truly find our way home." As the first light of dawn gently brushed the horizon, the world seemed to hold its breath in a quiet, sacred pause. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and gold, whispering promises of renewal and hope. She stood alone on the edge of her little garden, gazing upward as the stars flickered faintly, retreating into the vast expanse of the morning sky. The night had been a tapestry of voices, of forgiveness, of wounds healed, of hearts opening, woven into the fabric of her journey. Now the silence was filled with a gentle hum, a reminder that even in stillness, life continues to move forward, quietly and relentlessly. The sun rose higher, casting long, warm shadows across the earth, illuminating the simple beauty of her surroundings, the wildflowers swaying softly in the breeze, the distant call of a morning bird, the gentle ripple of a creek nearby. Nature's quiet symphony echoed a truth she now carried deep within her. Love is not an act of magic that rescues us from pain, but a steady proof that no one is truly alone in their struggles. It's in the subtle, unspoken gestures, the shared glances, the forgiving words, the silent understanding, that love whispers its most profound truths. She took a breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, and let her gaze drift upward once more. The stars, now fading into the blush of dawn, seemed to wink softly, as if sharing a secret only the night knew. It was a reminder that darkness and light are intertwined, that every ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning. Her heart, once heavy with fear and doubt, now beat with a quiet resolve, a testament to the resilience of love and the enduring strength of hope. The day ahead was uncertain, but she understood that her story was no longer just about survival. It was about embracing the truth that even in our most fragile moments, we are not alone. We are connected, by love, by memories, by the shared journey of becoming whole again. As she stepped forward, her footsteps light yet purposeful, she carried with her the silent music of the morning, a melody woven from the threads of forgiveness, acceptance, and the unbreakable human spirit. And so, in the gentle silence of dawn, she whispered a final thought into the awakening world. Love doesn't promise a miracle, but it offers us the quiet assurance that we are never truly solitary in our struggles. It reminds us that even in the darkest night, the promise of dawn awaits, always ready to illuminate the path ahead. If this story has touched your heart, remember that each of us carries our own stories of resilience and hope. Like, subscribe, and share, because in doing so, we join hands in spreading the message that no one is truly alone. Together, we can nurture a world where love is not just a fleeting wish but a steady, guiding light, a reminder that beneath every storm, the dawn patiently waits. And in that light, we find our way home.